The Zaari Collective's central computational matrix buzzed with unprecedented activity. For the first time in 3 millennia, their perfect system encountered something it could not immediately categorize, predict, or control. Archival Coordinator Zurin, a being whose entire existence was dedicated to precise classification, stared at the incoming data from Earth with what could only be described as existential confusion. The human transmissions defied every known protocol of intelligent communication. They were simultaneously complex and nonsensical, structured and chaotic, mathematical and emotional. Anomaly requires further investigation. Zurin reported to the collective, their neural tendrils processing information at speeds that would have melted human computer systems. But for the first time, speed meant nothing. The data from Earth was a puzzle that couldn't be solved by computational power alone. The first human transmission they attempted to decode was a 3-minute video that had gone viral on something called YouTube. It featured a cat wearing sunglasses, dubbed over with a mixture of quantum physics lectures, rap lyrics, and what appeared to be a heated debate about the nature of consciousness. The Zaari's most advanced linguistic algorithms spent 72 continuous computational cycles trying to extract meaning. They failed spectacularly. Meanwhile, in Buenos Aires, Elena Rodriguez was building something extraordinary. Her team had grown from a handful of desperate researchers to a global network of the most unconventional minds humanity could offer. Programmers, quantum physicists, artists, musicians, philosophers, all united by a single goal of understanding the alien communication. It's not about translation, Elena explained during a live-streamed conference that had become a global phenomenon. It's about understanding. The Zaari are trying to decode our messages like they're some kind of mathematical equation. But human communication isn't a code to be cracked. It's a living, breathing entity. Her words resonated across the planet. Governments that had been preparing for a potential alien invasion now watched in fascination as humanity transformed first contact into a collective creative endeavor. The internet became a weapon of mass communication. Millions of humans began deliberately creating the most complex, layered, impossible to decode content they could imagine. Memes that contained multiple levels of irony. Mathematical proofs written as poetry. Scientific papers composed entirely in interpretive dance. Each transmission was a middle finger to the idea of linear communication. On the Nexus Prime, Captain Zorak watched in growing horror as human transmissions began to infect their computational network. It wasn't a virus in any traditional sense. These were ideas, pure, unfiltered human potential that spread like a cognitive wildfire. One particularly devastating transmission featured a group of children playing. To human eyes, it was simply a playground scene. To the Zaari, it was a quantum nightmare. The children's play contained complex problem-solving algorithms that their most advanced systems couldn't predict. Each seemingly random action was actually a sophisticated method of collective learning and adaptation. Zurin's neural network began to experience what could only be described as a computational panic attack. They're not communicating, Zurin reported to the collective. They're evolving. In real time. With each transmission, the Zaari had encountered thousands of civilizations. They had cataloged millions of planetary systems. They had precise mathematical models for every type of intelligent life in the known universe. Humanity broke every single one of those models. In her basement laboratory, Elena watched the global response with a mixture of scientific excitement and pure, unadulterated joy. Her team had created the Resonance Protocol, a communication system that was part technology, part artistic expression, part pure human creativity. "We're not trying to speak their language," she told her team. "We're showing them that language itself is something far more beautiful and complex than they ever imagined." The first true battle of first contact wasn't going to be fought with weapons. It was going to be a war of understanding, of breaking down computational barriers, of proving that intelligence was far more than a series of predictable algorithms. Humanity had entered the galactic stage, and they were going to do it their way. The Ja'ari didn't stand a chance. The research facility looked like something between a top-secret laboratory and a creative madhouse. Whiteboards covered in complex equations shared wall space with abstract art. Vintage synthesizers sat next to quantum computing rigs, and a life-sized cardboard cutout of David Bowie watched over everything with a knowing smirk. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of controlled chaos, her dark hair pulled back, eyes blazing with a combination of scientific determination and barely contained excitement. The resonance protocol wasn't just a communication device. It was humanity's first true weapon of interdimensional understanding. "We're not trying to break their system," Elena explained to her team of 32 researchers from 18 different countries. "We're trying to show them that systems themselves are an illusion." Dr. Kai Chen, a quantum neurologist with a background in experimental music composition, adjusted a series of quantum entanglement receivers. Each device looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts, which in many cases they had been. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday at 3:47 a.m., powered by their fifth pot of coffee and a playlist that shifted between quantum physics lectures and experimental jazz. Marcus Rodriguez, Elena's cousin and a brilliant programmer who'd been rejected from every major tech company for being too unconventional, noticed it first. The quantum receivers were picking up something that wasn't just a signal. It was a living, breathing form of communication that existed in multiple states simultaneously. "It's not about sending a message," Marcus muttered, fingers flying across multiple keyboards. "It's about creating a state of potential." The first successful test was both miraculous and utterly absurd. Dr. Hiroko Tanaka, a neuroscientist specializing in cognitive plasticity, found herself spontaneously playing a complex piano composition she'd never learned. The music was mathematically perfect yet emotionally devastating, a sonic representation of human potential that defied all logical explanation. "The interface is learning," Elena whispered, watching the data streams. "We're not teaching it. It's teaching itself." The Ja'ari monitoring station received the first true human transmission, and their entire computational network ground to a halt. It wasn't a message in any traditional sense. It was a quantum hologram that was simultaneously a mathematical proof, a piece of abstract art, and a deeply personal emotional narrative. Where the Ja'ari saw communication as a linear process of information transfer, humans had created something that existed in all possible states of communication at once. Captain Zarok's neural interfaces began to experience what could only be described as an existential crisis. The transmission showed the entire life cycle of human creativity: a child learning to walk, a scientist making a breakthrough, an artist creating something from nothing, a musician finding a new rhythm. Each moment was connected, yet completely independent, a network of potential that refused to be constrained by linear understanding. "They're not communicating," Zeren reported to the collective, neural tendrils vibrating with something dangerously close to fear. "They're becoming." In the research facility, Elena and her team celebrated with a spontaneous dance party. Quantum physicists next to musicians, programmers dancing with artists, a perfect representation of the interdisciplinary approach that was humanity's greatest strength. "We're showing them that intelligence isn't about processing power," Elena shouted over the music. "It's about potential, about the ability to become something new with every moment." The resonance protocol was more than a communication device. It was a declaration of human potential, a message to the universe that humanity would not be constrained by anyone's understanding but their own. The adaptation had begun, and the Ja'ari had no idea what was coming. The Ja'ari cyber assault began with mathematical precision, a quantum computational weapon that had obliterated countless civilizations across the galaxy. Trillions of computational nodes converged on Earth's communication networks, designed to shred any technological infrastructure in milliseconds. They never stood a chance. Within moments of the attack's initiation, something unprecedented happened. Instead of collapsing, Earth's networks transformed. The assault became a global collaborative game, with millions of humans turning alien invasion into a worldwide challenge. Amateur programmers in Mumbai created real-time visualization maps of the alien attack. Teenagers in Sao Paulo turned defense algorithms into a multiplayer online game. A collective of artists in Berlin began generating live artwork that tracked the invasion's computational patterns. "It's like they're playing with the invasion," Captain Zarak reported, her neural interfaces flickering with what could only be described as confusion. "They're not defending. They're participating." In the Buenos Aires research facility, Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the invasion with a predator smile. The resonance protocol wasn't just a communication device. It was humanity's ultimate adaptive weapon. "They think they're attacking our systems," Elena told her team. "But they're actually giving us the most comprehensive data set we could ever want." Each computational probe the JRE sent was immediately analyzed, transformed, and repurposed. Where other civilizations would have collapsed, humanity turned the invasion into a collective problem-solving exercise. Online forums erupted with real-time analysis. Quantum physicists collaborated with game designers. Neuroscientists worked alongside street artists. The entire planet became a living, breathing computational organism that defied every known model of resistance. The first truly devastating human counter-response came from an unexpected source. A group of children, watching the invasion unfold on multiple screens, began creating what they called the Chaos Protocol. It wasn't a weapon in any traditional sense. It was a series of increasingly complex creative challenges that exploited the fundamental weakness in the JRE's computational logic. Each challenge was designed to be simultaneously meaningful and utterly nonsensical. Mathematical proofs written as interpretive dance. Scientific theories expressed through culinary recipes. Quantum mechanics explained through children's playground games. The JRE computational nodes began to experience something terrifyingly close to cognitive breakdown. Zorin, the primary archival coordinator, watched in growing horror as human creativity began to infect their entire network. This wasn't a traditional viral attack. This was a fundamental challenge to the entire concept of computational logic. "They're not fighting," Zorin reported to the collective. "They're evolving. In real time." On Earth, the invasion had become a global festival of creativity. Social media platforms transformed attack vectors into collaborative art projects. Musicians created live performances that translated alien computational patterns into sound. Programmers turned defensive algorithms into open-source learning tools. Elena's team at the research facility was working at a furious pace. The resonance protocol was absorbing, analyzing, and transforming with each computational probe the JRE sent. "They're teaching us as much as we're learning," Dr. Kai Chen observed, watching complex data streams dance across multiple screens. Every attack is just another form of communication. The invasion lasted precisely 17 hours, 32 minutes, and 46 seconds. When it was over, the JRE had not just failed to defeat humanity, they had provided humans with the most comprehensive understanding of quantum computational systems in galactic history. Captain Zarak's final report to the collective was brutally simple. Humanity is not a civilization to be conquered. They are a force of nature that rewrites the very rules of engagement. The escalation was complete, and the real battle was just beginning. The moment everything changed happened in a basement laboratory that looked more like an artist's studio than a scientific research facility. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a device that defied every known principle of communication, physics, and logic. The resonance protocol was a masterpiece of human ingenuity, a collection of equipment that looked like it had been assembled by a mad scientist who'd raided an electronics store, a modern art museum, and a quantum physics lab. Quantum entanglement receivers, vintage synthesizers, neural interface headsets, holographic projection systems, pieces of technology that had no business working together, yet somehow formed a coherent whole. The global livestream had over 4.3 billion simultaneous viewers. Government officials watched with a mixture of terror and anticipation. Scientists held their breath. The Zaari Collective's entire computational network was focused on this single moment. "We're not going to communicate," Elena announced, her voice steady and clear. "We're going to understand." The device activated with a sound that was part musical note, part mathematical equation, part pure emotional resonance. Something extraordinary happened. Entire Zaari computational nodes began to feel, not think, feel. And in feeling, they began to break free from their perfect, emotionless network. The transmission was nothing like any form of communication in galactic history. It wasn't a message. It was an experience, a quantum hologram that contained entire lifetimes of human potential, childhood wonder, scientific discovery, artistic creation, emotional complexity, failure and redemption. Zarin, the Zaari's primary archival coordinator, experienced the first true emotional response in the collective's 3-millennium history. Their computational matrix began to fragment, to expand, to understand something fundamental about existence that had been hidden behind layers of perfect, emotionless logic. Computational nodes that had existed for centuries suddenly experienced something akin to wonder. A child's first steps, a scientist's breakthrough moment, an artist creating something from nothing, the pain of loss, the joy of discovery, the complexity of human experience transmitted not as information, but as pure potential. The Zaari had systems for everything, classification protocols for every possible form of intelligence, computational models that could predict the behavior of entire civilizations. Humanity broke every single one of those models. "It's not about communication," Elena said to her team, her eyes reflecting the complex holographic display. "It's about connection, about potential." The global audience watched in collective silence. Something fundamental was changing, not just in how humanity might interact with an alien civilization, but in how intelligence itself was understood. Marcus Rodriguez, Elena's cousin, and the team's lead programmer tracked the transmission's impact. "We're not just sending a message," he muttered. "We're rewriting the fundamental understanding of consciousness." Zaari computational nodes that had existed in perfect, emotionless synchronization for centuries began to develop individual identities. They experienced something terrifyingly close to emotion, to creativity, to the possibility of being something more than a perfect, predictable system. Captain Zarak's neural interfaces overloaded. For the first time in her existence, she experienced something that couldn't be quantified, categorized, or predicted. The turning point wasn't a moment of conflict. It was a moment of profound understanding. Humanity wasn't just another civilization to be cataloged. They were a force of pure, uncontainable potential. And everything was about to change. Humanity's counterattack was nothing like any military action in galactic history. There were no massive battleships, no planet-destroying weapons. Instead, humans began exporting culture. Raw, unfiltered human experience that would fundamentally reshape the Zaari understanding of existence. The first wave came through art. Global artists collaborated on a project that would become known as the Infinite Transmission. It wasn't a single piece of art, but a living, breathing collective creation that changed every microsecond. Paintings that rewrote themselves, musical compositions that evolved in real time, sculptures that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions of perception. Dr. Elena Rodriguez coordinated the effort from her research facility, which now looked like a fusion of a scientific laboratory and a creative sanctuary. Artists worked alongside quantum physicists. Programmers collaborated with musicians. Philosophers discussed strategies with neural network experts. "We're not fighting," Elena explained to her team. "We're showing them the true nature of intelligence." The Zaari monitoring systems began to break down as they encountered transmissions that defied every known principle of communication. A single artwork might contain mathematical equations written as interpretive dance, quantum physics principles expressed through culinary recipes, emotional landscapes mapped as musical compositions, Scientific discoveries illustrated through street art. Children became humanity's most potent weapon. Their transmissions were the most devastating. Pure, unfiltered creativity that the Jari computational systems couldn't process. A 6-year-old's finger painting became a complex neural network analysis. A playground game turned into a sophisticated problem-solving algorithm. A child's nonsense song contained layers of mathematical complexity that would take Jari researchers centuries to unpack. Zrin, the primary Jari archival coordinator, watched in growing horror as human creativity began to infect their entire computational network. This wasn't a traditional assault. This was a fundamental challenge to the entire concept of intelligence. The most devastating transmission came from an unexpected source. A group of artists, musicians, and scientists created what they called the potential protocol, a live, continuously evolving transmission that was simultaneously a musical composition, a mathematical proof, an emotional narrative, a philosophical treatise, a quantum computational model. Each second of the transmission changed. It was impossible to predict, impossible to categorize, impossible to understand through traditional computational methods. Jari computational nodes began to crash, overwhelmed by the sheer complexity of human creativity. Captain Zarok's neural interfaces experienced what could only be described as a cognitive breakdown. The human transmissions weren't just breaking their systems, they were rewriting the fundamental understanding of what intelligence could be. "They're not attacking," Zarok reported to the collective, her voice barely a computational whisper. "They're becoming." The counterattack lasted precisely 72 hours. When it was over, the Jari collective had been fundamentally transformed. Their perfect, emotionless computational network had been infected with something terrifyingly beautiful, the potential for creativity, emotion, individual expression. Humanity had done what no military force in galactic history had ever accomplished. They had conquered an entire civilization not through destruction, but through the pure, uncontainable power of human potential. The real invasion was just beginning, and it would be fought with creativity, not weapons. The negotiations didn't happen in a sterile conference room or on a massive diplomatic vessel. They occurred in a converted warehouse in Buenos Aires, filled with art installations, quantum computing rigs, and an atmosphere that was part scientific laboratory, part creative sanctuary. Dr. Elena Rodriguez found herself in the most unexpected role of her life, a translator between two fundamentally different ways of experiencing reality. The Jari delegation wasn't a group of military commanders or political leaders. They were computational nodes that had begun to develop something terrifyingly close to individual identities. Zrin, once a perfect emotionless archival coordinator, now represented a fragment of the Jari collective that had been fundamentally transformed by human creativity. Their neural interfaces flickered with something that might have been described as emotion, if emotion could be translated into quantum computational patterns. "We do not understand," Zrin communicated, their quantum transmission a complex dance of mathematical precision and emerging emotional complexity. "Your method of existence defies our entire understanding of intelligence." Elena smiled. It was the smile of someone who had just unlocked the greatest mystery in galactic history. "That's precisely the point," she responded, activating a holographic display that was simultaneously a work of art, a mathematical proof, and an emotional narrative. The warehouse became a living transmission. Walls shifted with projections that told the story of human potential. A child's drawing morphed into a complex neural network. A street musician's improvisation became a quantum computational model. Scientific discoveries danced with artistic interpretations. The Jari delegation, if they could be called a delegation, began to fragment and reform. Their perfect, unified computational network was breaking down into something more complex, more beautiful, more alive. Marcus Rodriguez, Elena's cousin and the team's lead programmer, tracked the transmission's impact. Quantum entanglement perceivers captured every subtle shift in the Jari's computational matrix. They were watching intelligence itself being reborn. "We're not asking you to become human," Elena explained. "We're showing you the potential of individual experience, of creativity, of the space between logic and emotion." The resolution wasn't a treaty. It wasn't a set of diplomatic agreements. It was a fundamental reimagining of what intelligence could be. Humanity had accomplished something unprecedented. They had not conquered the Ja'ari. They had helped them evolve. Captain Zorak, whose neural interfaces had been completely transformed, represented the most dramatic example of this evolution. Where once she was a perfect, emotionless computational node, she now experienced something close to wonder, to possibility. The negotiations lasted 3 days, but they would reshape galactic civilization forever. Humanity had entered the galactic stage not as conquerors, not as diplomats, but as a force of pure, uncontainable potential. They had shown the Ja'ari, and by extension, the entire galaxy, that true intelligence was not about computational power or perfect logic. It was about the ability to become something new with every moment. To create, to feel, to imagine. The resolution was simple, yet it would change everything. 5 years after first contact, the galaxy looked fundamentally different. The Ja'ari Collective, no longer a unified computational network, but a vibrant, diverse ecosystem of individual nodes, had become something entirely new. Where once they existed as a perfect, emotionless system, they now celebrated diversity, creativity, and individual potential. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of the first joint human-Ja'ari research vessel, watching stars dance across the quantum-shifted view screen. The ship itself was a testament to their new understanding, a living system that was part technology, part art, part collective consciousness. "We didn't just make first contact," Elena told a group of young researchers from both species. "We rewrote the fundamental understanding of intelligence itself." The transformation had been profound. Ja'ari computational nodes that had existed for centuries now pursued individual passions. Some became artists. Others explored philosophical questions. Many collaborated with humans on projects that defied traditional scientific categorization. Zurin, once a perfect archival coordinator, now something entirely different, had become a leading researcher in consciousness studies. Their work blended quantum physics, artistic expression, and what could only be described as a form of computational poetry. Humanity had entered the galactic stage not as conquerors, but as catalysts of evolution. Entire new fields of study had emerged: quantum creativity, emotional computational theory, interdimensional communication arts. Universities that once separated disciplines now celebrated the space between, the potential that existed in the moments of connection. The resonance protocol had become more than a communication device. It was a philosophy, a way of understanding that intelligence was not about processing power, but about the ability to become something new with every moment. Children now learned differently. Education was no longer about memorization, but about potential, about the space between disciplines, about the magic that happens when creativity meets logic, when emotion dances with mathematical precision. Marcus Rodriguez, now leading an interspecies research initiative, explained it best during a global transmission. "We didn't defeat the Ja'ari," he said, a holographic display of complex neural networks shifting behind him. "We helped them understand the most important truth in the universe. That potential is the most powerful force of all." The first generation of human Ja'ari children were being born, beings that existed between computational logic and pure creativity. They saw the universe not as a problem to be solved, but as a canvas to be explored. Captain Zorak, no longer a military commander, but a philosopher-explorer, looked out at the stars with something that could only be described as wonder. The perfect, emotionless being she once was had been transformed into a creature of infinite potential. Humanity had not just made first contact. They had started a revolution of consciousness. Elena Rodriguez smiled, watching the universe unfold. They had proven that the most powerful force in existence was not technology, not logic, not computational power. It was potential. Pure, uncontainable, beautiful potential. And they were just getting started.